So I'm Sarah Jovan. Thanks for having me. I'm a research ecologist with the PNW Research Station, and so my research focuses on using moss and lichens as bioindicators of air pollution. So I'm going to explain, why moss, and also summarize how the moss method was applied in the Duwamish. Next slide, please. Perfect. So, unlike trees, for instance, moss lack roots and absorb all their nutrients and water from the atmosphere. They have many adaptations to very efficiently like scavenge and grab and hold on to nutrients. And so, this causes pollutants to also accumulate in their tissues. So, what we can do is we can grind up moss and then measure those tissue concentrations to use as an inexpensive proxy or indicator of what's in the air. So many studies have used moss in this way, but we are the first, to my knowledge, to use it within a community science framework, which is pretty exciting. Next slide, please. So this Duwamish study was just a tremendous opportunity to help the community better understand long-standing air quality concerns where they live. And it was also an important proof of concept for bioindicator science because, the results of moss studies tend to stay within scientific circles and be published in scientific journals, which, most people don't read unless they're like masochists or something. So, what it means is that a lot of moss studies end up ultimately having very limited impact on the air quality in the area that they sought out to better explain. Next slide, please. So, as Monica said, the community was involved in all phases of the study, but everyone's favorite part was how the youth corps led moss sample collection and preparation for heavy metals analysis. So you're going to hear more about that for our next panelist. But I did want to say, we built in a validation step from the beginning where we had, experts collect from the same locations as some of the sites visited by youth, which was a great part of the study design because it allowed us to then show statistically that the youth collected a comparable data set. They actually did a very good job. Next slide, please. So just a quick example of the results, which are all based on the youth moss samples. There's just too much to cover here. So here's just an example. So if you look at the box plot on the left, in the orange highlighted area, we can plainly see that arsenic and chromium are much higher than we've observed in other moss data sets. And this is important because, heavy metals are just one group of pollutants that are of potential concern in the Duwamish area. So, this helped the community decide to investigate heavy metals further. So, if you look to the right at the two maps showing the color-coded arsenic and chromium concentrations in these moss samples, what the box plot tells us is that even sites further from that industrial core where you see the darker dots and higher arsenic and chromium, even those further out sites that are like light blue and white, we're still really high relative to what we'd seen before. So, as you can imagine, like these graphs by visualizing something that is usually invisible really helps like ground the conversation about air quality, and in this case galvanize several positive outcomes for the community. Next slide. So my last slide, just to quickly summarize. So obviously, social benefits, huge, one important outcome. The results also inspired substantial investment of additional funding, time, and attention towards the issues. Also fantastic. Additionally, with the moss map showing higher areas and lower areas and et cetera, the community was able to successfully advocate local air quality regulators for a follow-up study to help them determine whether, those heavy metals levels we're seeing in moss might be hazardous to humans. You need an actual air quality monitor to make that connection. So just to wrap up, preliminary results from that air monitoring do show that arsenic, chromium, and other heavy metals exceed cancer screening thresholds, but really, the full analysis and interpretation are still on their way. So stay tuned for more information about that. So now I am pleased to pass the baton over to Alexis and Christian to hear about the community's perspective.